French cities ban full-body swimwear for Muslim women. Is it in the spirit of secularism or discrimination? Also on today's program, liars for leaders. A look at why the truth may not matter so much in politics. And in Picture This, why Indonesians are swimming in celebration of their independence. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Andrea Sankey. An article of clothing has yet again set off a firestorm in France. Several cities have banned full-body swimwear, also known as burkinis, worn by some Muslim women from their beaches. Now, it began last week when the mayor of the French Riviera city of Cannes condemned the clothing as a symbol of extremism. His comments came against a backdrop of heightened fear following targeted attacks in France this year and the nation's extended state of emergency. Now, other resort towns have since jumped on the bandwagon, banning the swimsuit in the name of secularism and security. But critics say it's an assault on freedom and a woman's right to choose. And that, for many Muslim families, their fun in the sun has now turned into a nightmare of discrimination. Today's Newsmaker is the burkini, as we ask if the French ban on full-body swimwear is justified or oppressive.
Summer in the French Riviera. But this beach season hasn't been as carefree as in years past. An attack in Nice last month, which killed 85 people, has further burdened the French consciousness with the notion that an attack could happen anywhere, at any time. In Cannes, police are out on patrol, enforcing a ban on beach bags. France's public spaces have become increasingly militarized under an extended state of emergency. A measure first put in place in November of last year after a coordinated string of attacks in Paris, marking the deadliest assault on French soil since World War II. Both attacks were claimed by Daesh. Public fear, coupled with France's staunch policy of secularism, has intensified pressure on French Muslims, especially when it comes to conforming to specific dress standards. France already has a ban in place on the full face veil, known as the niqab, or the burqa. And the headscarf, or hijab, has been banned in public schools since 2004. Now, a growing number of communities in France's south have placed a ban on another item of clothing, a full-body swimsuit nicknamed the burkini. But the measure being supported by some in the name of secularism and security is being criticized by others as a thinly veiled attempt to harass Muslims in France.
Je pense que ce n'est pas illégal, que tout le monde a le droit d'accéder à la plage puisque c'est un lieu public. En même temps, si on pense aux droits des femmes, si on accepte de plus en plus de choses, c'est un peu une régression pour les femmes et d'autant plus pour les femmes françaises qui sont assez libres.
Je pense qu'il a voulu faire ça pour éviter justement des provocations ou des choses sur la plage qui pourraient être prétexte à de la violence.
Public opinion is mixed on the ban of the full-body swimsuit. But for those who it affects, it's seen as a restriction of free will. Liberté is part of the national motto. But secularism is also strongly guarded in French society. Where this burkini ban falls between the two principles is a matter of heated debate. Corsica has become the third place in France to adopt the measure. Tensions have risen on the French island after a brawl between families of North African descent and local youths. France's far-right parties have seized on the issue to push their political agenda. Even France's Prime Minister Manuel Valls has said the so-called burkini is based on the enslavement of women. But critics say the ban is discrimination and only contributes to a rising tide of Islamophobia in France. Randolph Nogel, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now here in the studio is TRT World's Moussim Enemi, who's been following the story very closely. And from Toulouse is Rim Sarah Alouane. She is a human rights scholar at the University of Toulouse and a specialist in religious freedom. Thanks both so much for joining us. Sarah, let me start with you. Is this ban about secularism or is it active discrimination against Muslims in France?
This ban is clearly another way to target women. Let me tell you something. Laïcité is freedom. Laïcité is a tool to protect religious freedom and freedom of conscience. And at the moment, the French government, both the right and the left wing, are instrumentalizing it to target women on the name of security. So yes, we are facing a blatant attack on French Muslims.
Laïcité, meaning secularism, Moussine, is it really about secularism then, according to the French government?
Well, the government has come with many reasons. One of them, as we have seen in the reportage, it's that the government is not only a government, it's also a political tool which is showing the woman enslavement. That's what the Prime Minister said. And it's pretty unusual to have Manuel Valls joining into this usually far-right speeches. That's pretty interesting to notice that in France right now, because in the last 18 months, there have been a lot of attacks. So there is a lot of tension in France. And these attacks in France has come up with a big sentiment that something has to be done. So anything that can be done will be seen as a solution. And that's what the Prime Minister said. He says he encouraged any kind of situation, any kind of decree, any kind of law who is going to encourage the living together instead of confronting people together.
But they might say it's part of the solution, while others would argue it's actually part of the problem. It antagonizes people, and it's completely unnecessary. Rimsara?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, literally, they are using the state of emergency excuse and the fight against terrorism. They're banning a wetsuit. You know, the burkini is a Western creation. It was created in Australia by Muslim women to be able, to reconcile, to be able to practice her faith while, being able to enjoy recreational activities. And yet, what are we going to tell to this woman? You cannot dress that way because we decide, without even asking your opinion, that you are oppressed. These women are enjoying a very French activity, which is enjoying a nice time by the beach, dressed differently. What does that mean? You are for the right of women to choose whatever they want to wear, or you are against it. There are no middle ground. And here the message is clear. Women cannot decide what to wear. And when they are Muslim, it's even worse, because if they are covered, it automatically means they are oppressed. And they are not even bringing them to the table to discuss it. Did they ask them if they were oppressed? This is a blatant violation of human rights here.
It's interesting, Moussine, that they are equating full-body swimwear with extremism. Because if there is genuinely a connection to extremism, then why haven't these women been detained or have been questioned for whatever links they may have to extremist groups like Daesh?
Yeah, it's very interesting actually, because people make the confusion between someone wearing an Islamic garment or Islamic, dressing, compared to what other people wear. And here you can obviously see that the government is trying to say that we have to do something. These people who did the attacks in the last 18 months in Paris were not most of them not very well known. They might have some signals about them. They might have some ideas about them. However, most of them are born and raised in France. They went to fight abroad and they came back to perpetrate the attacks. So it's very hard for the government to counter these people. So they have to come with a solution. They have to come with a voice to say that we are doing something. And this is exactly what they're doing by preventing this government on the beach. In other hand, you can also say that this speech, which used to be before the far right, vocabulary, is now shared by also leftists.
Rimsara, let me ask you, what can women like you in France then do to combat this? I mean, you would think it would say something to see people like British celebrity Nigella Lawson. I think we have some pictures of her.
Absolutely.
Also on a
Yeah,
beach in
very
Australia
fair as well.
wearing
Yeah.
a burkini by choice. So where are the women
Absolutely.
like you know, putting a front forward to combat what you see as this massive discrimination?
I think that's actually one of the main issues in France. Muslims need to organize themselves. The state shall not do it, to raise their voice. Because literally, the government, public authorities are using the narrative used against the Jews in the 30s, trying to make a minority disappear from the public space. And, you know, the burkini is just a new story of this summer. It has been going on since the 90s. First, it was a headscarf at school. Then it was a full face covering. Then it was a question of halal food. What's next? I mean, we have a former minister who required Muslims to be discreet in the public space. What does that mean? What does that mean? Are you a public order disturbance because you're wearing a wetsuit? How do you qualify legally a public disturbance? They use the argument of good morals. So it's okay to go topless on the beach, but it's not okay to wear a wetsuit?
It's interesting. We actually spoke about that very briefly before, Moussine, that there are these bizarre extremes, that it is okay for women to go topless on beaches in France. That's not even okay in one of the most democratic countries on the planet, the United States. But a burkini is going to be banned. So let me ask you if you think that might encourage anti-Muslim Islamic behavior, anti-Islamic behavior, by putting the law on the side of the people that want to see Muslims not be able to, so-called, observe their religion?
First of all, the Prime Minister ruled out a national-wide law. He said this has to be like local decrees, local laws done by mayors in their own cities. The interesting part also is that this is a very populist speech for the government. And no one can forget that the elections are coming up in the next 8 months. So basically, coming up with this kind of speech will obviously help the government to say that they have a stand on this issue and they're not doing anything. So most of the leftists are using this as a communication tool. The far right are using this as obviously something that they think, and as you said, will obviously raise Islamic reactions.
Let me get a last word from Rim Sarah before we conclude this. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I would add that this ban actually stands against everything France stands for. It stands against freedom. Here again, I repeat and I insist. You are for the right of women to decide, or you are against it. And there is no middle ground. It's not okay to force women to wear certain garments. It's not okay to force women to remove them. Bring them to the table. Second, blatant discrimination, violation of equality between citizens. And it's also a violation of laicity and of secularism. The state should be neutral. The law guarantees freedom of religion and state neutrality. The state is not supposed to tell what is religious or not. And here again, we are manipulating secularism and laicity to make religious minorities disappear from the public space. And this is extremely dangerous. If you do not want what happened in the 30s to the Jews to happen in France with the Muslims, something has to be done.
Okay, Rim Sarah, I will give you the final word. Thank you so much for joining us, and Moussine as well on the Newsmakers.
Thank you.
Still to come on the Newsmakers, a moment of truth in politics may not be what voters want. We look at growing research showing the public prefers their leaders to lie. And in Picture This, 71 years and counting, Indonesians celebrate their independence. Exaggerations, half-truths, and outright lies. All politicians are accused of them. But this year's U.S. presidential campaign has been riddled with accusations of inaccuracy. The fact-checking organization PolitiFact says that 2008 was a much more honest American election than we're seeing in 2016. And they blame Donald Trump for peddling the highest number of falsehoods over any other candidate. But will that sway voters loyal to Mr. Trump? And will Hillary's supporters ignore the facts surrounding her email scandal? Sandra Gatman explains why the truth may not matter that much in politics.
Some people have called it a campaign like no other, with candidates for America's top job spending a great deal of time calling each other liars.
And there's a lot of lies being told.
From the vacuous sloganeering to the
outright lies.
Such lies.
This man is a pathological liar.
I might lie to you like Hillary does all the time, but I'll never lie to Giacomo, okay?
Of course, high-profile deceit is nothing new. There was the Watergate scandal, Bill Clinton denying his affair with Monica Lewinsky, and the premise of the Iraq War.
No terrorist network will gain weapons of mass destruction from the Iraqi regime.
But are politicians increasingly getting away with distorted facts and half-truths? And do voters even care? The last few months on the U.S. campaign trail have kept fact-checking websites quite busy.
They can't get jobs because there are no jobs.
In fact, there were 5.4 million job openings recorded at the end of April.
My personal email use was fully above board. It was allowed by the State Department, as they have confirmed.
The State Department Office of Inspector General report said that it has been department policy since 2005 that normal day-to-day operations be conducted on government servers.
So the truth is out there and is more accessible thanks to social media. But according to psychologists, most people suffer from so-called confirmation bias. It means people tend to search for, interpret, and favor facts which confirm pre-existing beliefs. In the UK, campaigners to leave the European Union maintained that EU membership costs £350 million a week on their big red bus. That number was later proved false, but the Brexit camp won anyway. The facts, it seems, are no match for what most voters already want. Despite a climate of lies, there are signs of a thirst for truth. U.S. media outlets have begun fact-checking live on screen.
To get nuclear weapons, give me a break.
Maybe they would, in fact, be better off if they defend themselves from North Korea. Maybe we would be better off, including with nukes. Yes, including with nukes.
Even outsiders like Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, as well as fringe parties in Greece and Spain, have resonated with voters as an alternative to an establishment seen as deceptive. Those already in power are being scrutinized for failing on their election pledges, like French President François Hollande's plans to avoid austerity and U.S. President Barack Obama on shutting down the Guantanamo Bay prison. Truth in politics may matter after all, but not so much, it seems, on the campaign trail, where honesty doesn't win votes, but promises do. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers.
Joining me now from California is Dan Ariely. He is the author of The Honest Truth About Dishonesty and a professor of psychology and behavioral economics at Duke University. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. First, I want to get your perspective, and you've studied so many cases of dishonesty and outright lying in politics. So give me, if you can, kind of the worst case you've seen and tell us how damaging it actually proved to be.
So I think that the worst case we saw was Bill Clinton's dishonesty about Monica Lewinsky. And interestingly, it wasn't so much about the act, it was that he defended it under oath. And it's an interesting distinction, how people lie not under oath and how people lie under oath. And politicians turns out to be a very, very special case of lying. And there's a couple of reasons why we don't mind so much when politicians lie. The first one is that you know the sentence that there are two things you don't want to see how they're being made, sausages and politics. And we kind of know that politics is a dirty game, and we just understand that this is part of the rule, so we want our politicians to be able, the politicians represent our side, we want them to be at least as able as the politician on the other side, so to level the playing field, we're okay for them to lie.
See, and that's what's interesting. When you give Bill Clinton as the worst case scenario, a lot of people defended him because they said it's his personal life. In the end, it really wasn't our business anyway, and it didn't have anything to do with the job he was doing as a politician. So is that kind of an example of how people blur the lines between being honest and dishonest and why it might be okay to lie?
Yeah, I think that, by the way, when I'm saying it's the worst case, it's not my moral judgment in terms of what's better and worse. It's time of the reaction. And I think in Clinton's case, it was what was so negative about it in people's mind was that he lied under oath, right? Where you say, okay, we have the business of working as a politician, and that we understand needs to have some dishonesty. But then when people are under oath, the rules are different. But here's the more troubling thing. What we find is that people want the politicians on the other side of the aisle to be honest, but they want their politicians to be dishonest. And why? Look, nobody has dishonesty as a goal. Nobody thinks that being dishonest is better than being honest. But life is about multiple goals. There are lots of human values. There's lots of things we're striving for. And sometimes those values collide. So, for example, you can ask the question of, truth or being pleasant to your coworkers. Which one wins? And often we say white lies, and we value the happiness of our coworkers above truthfulness. The same thing works for politics, where you could say, I have policies that I want enacted. And if you're the right side of the US, you might want Obamacare to be abolished. If you're left side, you might want harsher policies for global warming. Whatever you want, everybody recognizes that if our politicians lie a little bit or are a little bit conniving, they're more likely to get the policies that we want to be reenacted.
That's fine, I guess, but the problem is when lying actually becomes cheating, when you win on the basis of cheating. And that's what's so disturbing, and that's when people start asking, why are there no penalties for having lied in your campaign? There's no kind of precedent set. There's no kind of disqualification for just being outright dishonest and winning a campaign based on cheating.
Yeah, so first of all, I don't think it's fine, right? I think it's terrible that people are cheating, and it's kind of an escalation problem, right? That if everybody else is cheating, there's a feeling that our politicians need to cheat as well, and we want our politicians to be just as successful, we need them to cheat as well. So it's certainly a slippery slope, and it's very, very sad. Now, the thing is that every politician, when they lie to in the name of their ideology, their voters don't care. Right? I'm not saying that they never care, but they don't care as much, right? So if you have an ideology of anti-immigration and your leader is exaggerating about it, first of all, there's a question of do you even know, do you know the facts and so on? But even if you know the facts, you say, I'm so much against immigration, we need to do something to convince the idiots on the other side of the aisle that this is an important problem, that we need to act this way, and you don't feel outraged because you're feeling like you're working together toward the goal.
Has this campaign in the United States, this presidential campaign, as well as Brexit, have those two been able to lower the bar almost to the floor by proving that not only can you lie and get away with lying, but you'll actually be rewarded for it? You'll win. And is there a tremendous danger in that?
Absolutely. We find that in general, cheating is about a slippery slope. It's about the standard of what is acceptable. And I think that once we've reached this, I'm not sure it's the floor, it could be the next election will teach us that there's a new floor to reach. But I think it's incredibly troubling, the level of dishonesty. It's kind of a bad social coordination where everybody thinks that everybody else is lying and everybody stops caring about it. Everybody suffers.
Okay, Dan Ariely, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us on the Newsmakers.
My pleasure.
In today's Picture This, Indonesians are banging the drums of independence as they celebrate the anniversary of their liberation. Let's take a look. Today's newsmaker was the burkini, as we asked if the French ban on full-body swimwear is justified or oppressive. Several cities have banned the swimwear worn by some Muslim women from their beaches. It comes against a backdrop of heightened fear following targeted attacks in France this year. But critics say it's an assault on freedom and a woman's right to choose. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Andrea Sankey. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.